Stress, that's the way that I get things done. If I'm not under pressure, then I sleep too long and I hang around like a bum. I think I'm going nowhere and that makes me nervous. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's out to get me, but I feel alright. Everybody's thinking about me. It's the little things that get you. It's the little things that get you when you weren't paying attention. It's the little things that get you. It's the little things that get you. It's the little things that get you when you weren't paying attention. I'm trying to cut down on my caffeine consumption. So when I get up, I just have one cup of coffee, and I like to have another cup of coffee with my breakfast. And on the way to work, I like to get a cup of coffee, like the kind of cup of coffee that you get with the donuts. If I never get the donut, I just have the cup of coffee. And when I get to work, I like to have a cup of coffee, because I like to have coffee when I'm talking on the phone. It usually goes cold, and I need to get another cup of coffee, and it's lunch, and I have an espresso. And when I get back, it's not morning anymore, so I have a Diet Cola. and another Diet Cola. But then I'm feeling fine, and I'm feeling pretty sharp, and I'm feeling pretty wired, and I'm getting things done. But right about 2, I get this little tiny migraine. It starts by my eyes, and it moves to the back of my neck, and it moves to the bottom of my spine. But it doesn't get there till 5 or 6 o'clock, which is the end of the day. So I'm fine, so I'm fine, so I'm fine, so I'm fine, so I'm fine. Except when I have to work late, which I usually do. Addicted to stress, that's the way that I get things done. If I'm not under pressure, then I sleep too long, and I hang around like a bum, and I think I'm going nowhere, and that makes me nervous. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright. Everybody's thinking about me. Hey, how you doing? Looking good. You been working out? Yeah, I can tell. Alright, see you later. I love to work, I love to run, I love to play real hard. I love to steal little things from the grocery store, like a piece of bubble gum, or sometimes I just stick my thumb in a peach and leave it there. I love to work, I love to run, I love to water ski, snowboard, jet ski, skydive, parasail, hang glide, rollerblade, mountain bike, bungee jump. Well, I mean, I'd love to do these things if I ever had the time. I love to work, I love to work, I love to work out after work. I love to spend a little time with this woman I'm seeing, except we never really get all the time to spend together, so we call each other up and we talk about work. But what I think I really love is to get up on myself on a little tiny island in the middle of the ocean with just me and a book and a cellular phone and a personal computer in case something came up. And I'd eat and I'd drink and I'd run and I'd sleep and I wouldn't do nothing except swim all day. So, you know, my beeper doesn't work underwater. Where were the sharks? Where were the sharks? Where were the sharks? And there's this kind of anemone that sticks in your foot and the poison goes up to your brain and you die. And sand fleas! Sand fleas! Yeah. But actually, I think it'd be really relaxing. Just me by myself in the middle of the ocean. And that's what I really love to do more than anything else, except I probably hate it. Breaking distress, that's the way that I get things done. If I'm not under pressure, then I sleep too long, and I hang around like a bomb. I think I'm going nowhere, and that makes me nervous. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright. Everybody's thinking about me, but I feel alright. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright. Everybody's thinking about me, but I feel alright. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright.
Alright, and of course, now that I start the show, the dog wants all my attention. Come here, Elsie. Show off. Come on. Yeah, you can show off. Yeah, you can. There's your big puppy. There's your big puppy. Yes, you are. Boner La Cal, and welcome to another 7 at 7. My weekly roundup of news and whatchamahoos. I'm not going to be saying that every week, but, I mean, this dog really wants my attention. Hey, go lay down. Go. Go lay down. I know, but you gotta go lay down. Alright, so, yeah, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining me. We are going to have quite a lot of fun today, and by fun, I mean fucking terrorism. I'm just going to start the show today by addressing the terror attack that took place at the very beginning of, I guess it was not the beginning of the week, but the middle of the week? Yeah, it was October, so I guess it was close to the beginning of the week. The terror attack that took place on Christmas. There was, I'm going to go into an article about this, but there was just this moment when I heard about it that I realized that I'm no longer bothered by this shit. Does that make sense? It's not hitting me the way it used to. And now, I'm just bored of it. I don't know how else to describe it. I'm bored of it, and I'm just like, oh, another fucking truck apiece? Really? And it's not a feeling I'm used to. I'm very used to constantly having some emotional reaction to the situation, but now it's just what constantly happens in Europe over here, and that's kind of hard to stomach looking at it from, the outside, or as much from the outside as introspection is. So, we're going to start there today, and we're just going to quickly go over the terror attack in New York City. Let me drop you guys over here. 8 killed as truck plows into pedestrians in downtown New York City terror attack. 8 terror attack. See, it's very difficult for me to even think of it as a terror attack because I'm no longer terrified. You take away the guns, they're going to use the trucks. You take away the trucks, they're going to use the boats. You take away the boats, they're going to use the bombs. You take away the bombs, they're just going to keep doing this shit. Killing themselves, and 8 people, and Hero Cop, and this same story over and over and over. A terrorist in a rental truck sped for nearly a mile down a popular bike-only path in Lower Manhattan on Tuesday, killing 8 people in the shadow of the World Trade Center and then shouting, Allahu Akbar. This was an act of terror, Mayor Bill de Blasio declared at an evening press conference. Well, it didn't seem too, fucking broken up talking about that. A particularly cowardly act of terror aimed at innocent civilians, aimed at innocent people going about their lives. Seyfullo Saipov, a 29-year-old immigrant from Uzbekistan, was shot by a cop after getting out of his car at Chambers and West Streets with 2 realistic-looking guns while screaming Allahu Akbar, Arabic for God is great. Pretty sure everyone fucking knows that at this point, but thank you, New York Post. Thank you very much for clearing that up, rather. He was running around Chambers. Somebody started to chase him, said a 14-year-old student at nearby Stuyvesant. Stuyvesant? I never knew how to say that. High school, which was just letting out for the day. Everyone starts running. Saipov's bloody 17-block trail of terror. It's not even that fucking... He drove a truck down a bike path for 17 blocks and hit 8 people. Okay, no, he hit, like 24 people, 25 people, and killed 8 of them. Alright. Then he got out with the pellet and paintball guns, sending panicked bystanders fleeing through the streets. So, see, this is so, oh my god, this is so milquetoast. I feel terrible even going over it, because the man doesn't deserve the time of day. And that is the problem with terrorism. Once it becomes mainstay, once it becomes happenstance, commonplace, it loses all of its impacts. There's no reason to talk about this because he was just an asshole, being as much of an asshole as possible before achieving police-assisted suicide. And that is a fucked up thing to do to the cops, to the people on the bike path. For what? Some religious victory? 1 second, something's unplugged. It should not be unplugged. Sorry. There we go. But pellet and paintball guns. The man giving chase was a cop who fired 5 shots. Saipov fell to the ground, still raising his weapon in the air until the officer kicked it out of his hands. The uniformed police officer assigned to the 1st Precinct confronted the subject and shot him in the abdomen, adding he was wounded and transported to a local hospital. Meanwhile, bodies covered in white sheets were left scattered in the path and crumpled remains. This asshole doesn't deserve the time of day. I really don't believe he does. Because then we're paying attention to it. We're giving them what they want. Airtime. So I'm not going to be giving him airtime. We have gone about 5-6 minutes covering that, but I only have one thing to say about it, and that is, it is not the most important thing happening this week. Hell, it's not even the most important thing that happened today. So let's get to that. Antifa's civil war on November 4th was really just a few protests against Trump. Oh, it was a lot less than that. Smoke and fire signifying absolutely nothing. This was an absolute mess. But the problem is, it's kind of a mess for both sides. Because, you know, the right basically gave them all the advertising they needed by continually packing Twitter, Facebook, all these places with condemnation of it. I'm not saying they shouldn't have. Good on everyone for doing so. But that was the story, whether anyone wanted it to be or not. Now, the fact that it was so minuscule and pathetic, as we'll come to see, is perhaps the most interesting part of the story, and why it's good that everyone did what they did. I don't know if you guys were watching Twitter, but Antifa, it was very, very sad watching the latest, for if you just searched Antifa. Watching that latest was very pathetic. And I hate to say it, this is going to sound very disturbing, but I think they're going to have to kill someone to actually get heard at this point, because they're doing tiny, tiny shit with no opposition in sight. And it's property damage is what it ends up amounting to. So, this afternoon, November 4th arrived in Midtown Manhattan like any other Saturday. Families breezed in and out of shops and restaurants along Fifth Avenue. Couples chatted on bench parks in Manhattan, enjoying the crisp autumn air. You could be forgiven for not knowing that a protest billed Friday by Fox News as the Antifa apocalypse was gathering on the south side of Times Square. Yeah, Fox News also has a lot to blame for the fucking huge story that it became. And every news outlet, including Yahoo, is putting all their effort into making sure everyone knows, oh, this is Fox News' fault. All the hullabaloo was Fox News' fault. The so-called November 4th protests, which took place in cities across the country today, were boring as fuck, completely disjointed. It was Occupy all over again, but worse, honestly. I don't know if anyone else was watching the streams, but it just, again, song and fury signifying nothing. Far-right conspiracies had morphed into the event of a fan, blah, 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 blah. In Times Square by 2:30 p.m., half an hour after the New York City event was supposed to begin, a little more than 300 people showed up, according to NYPD officers tasked with securing it. Many of the signs refused fascism had prepared, set stacked against a metal railing. Organizers handed out leaflets about the Revolutionary Communist Party, an older radical group with ties to refuse fascism. Yeah. The Revolutionary Communist Party. As in Bob Akisian? Bob Akisian. Just look it up right quick. No, not Bob Sarkeesian. I know it's Avakian, that's what it is. I knew it was one of those weird Armenian names. Yeah, born in Washington, D.C., grew up in Berkeley, California. Avakian became involved in the Students for Democratic Society at Berkeley, the Free Speech Movement, the Black Panther Party. In 1968, he wrote articles for the Peace and Freedoms Party publications. In the early 70s, Avakian served jail time for desecrating the American flag during a demonstration. He was charged with assaulting a police officer in 1979 at a demonstration in Washington, D.C., protesting Deng Xiaoping's meeting with Jimmy Carter. After receiving an arrest warrant, Avakian jumped bail and fled to France. Yeah, and this this is the guy who currently he's the current committee chairman from jail. And they have ties to Refuse Fascism. The irony does not escape me, by the way. I'm just trying to move forward with this story because it's tiny. New York had 300 people. DC had like 200 people. Everywhere else, maybe 100 people at best. It was insignificant, and it really goes to show just how extreme and fringe all of this shit really fucking is. It's amazing to see now. There's just these completely stupid extremes, right? And they're out there. They're out there with their ideas, and you know, they've been given a lot of airtime, and we're starting to see, oh shit, no, these fringe groups are extremely fringe. Does that mean they don't have the right to speak? Not at all. They absolutely have the right to speak, and I'm going to stand by that, but at the same time, I'm going to laugh my ass off because nothing is getting done. It's just a giant shit show. It's such a mess. Let's see. Roughly 5,000 had pledged interest, but when all is said and done, burgeoning leftist groups like the Democratic Socialists of America, protest mainstays like the Industrial Workers of the World, and the masked anarchists that had captured the imagination of the people, imagination of the people on the far right, failed to attend. Roughly 5 Trump supporters showed up to counter the demonstration. In the words of Christopher Lehman, a 56-year-old Trump supporter who made the trip from Belmar, New Jersey to counter the event, I thought there would be more of them. I thought there would be more of us too. Lehman, who brought an American flag and wore a jacket with Trump written across the back in big letters, said that someone had to excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm still a bit very sick, but I wasn't going to leave you guys without a show. Someone had to come and support the president. The stated goal of the protest was, according to Refuse Fascism, to create a sustained movement on the streets to remove Trump's administration from office. The group ran an ad in the New York Times on page 5 this week. The Trump-Pence regime must go November 4th. It begins, be there. Join with the thousands. There weren't thousands even across the whole country. What Trump and his administration are doing couldn't pose an existential threat to humanity. Andy Z, a member of the blah blah blah, not reading your propaganda. Ultimately, however, few attendees that spoke to Newsweek claimed they had been aware of the ad or drawn in by it. Harriet Russmeyer, 89, claimed to have heard about it through neighbors and decided to show up. She claimed to have no knowledge of Refuse Fascism or the Revolutionary Communist Party. I want to do something against Trump, Russmeyer told Newsweek. The lies and the incredibly backward view he has. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so, yeah. This is where we are, though, isn't it? We are left with 80 or so people, coming out in Seattle, in Portland, 300 coming out in New York, 200 coming out in DC. You had nothing. It was, in those now popular words, a nothing burger. Thank you, CNN. And it's now such a mess that there's not even a point in talking about, what they did, because there has been violence. Don't get me wrong. This is Antifa, after all, and on the West Coast, they were raring for a fight. All, 6.5 of them. And there was a little bit of violence that took place, but it was so tiny. The country is moving on past these extreme groups. And while these extreme groups are extremely effective at taking advantage of social media, whether for outreach and emotional manipulation campaigns, or through memes and direct social media campaigns, these groups are loud and, effective at spreading an online message, but that power doesn't translate into the real world. And while, maybe 80, 100, 200, 300 people in a certain city are talking about being violent, you have to realize that most of the country is moving on with an economy that is booming. Jobs are coming back to the United States. Coal jobs are coming back. Steel jobs are coming back. We are getting back to a place where we are accomplishing, great things. And yes, our economy is still massively inflated since the tech boom because of the inclusion of unbound commodities such as, Google stocks, Microsoft stocks, these very, very powerful, long-lasting super blue chips that are independent of any commodity or and define their own markets, essentially. They're monopolies, but they're more than monopolies, and it's fucked up. And it does cause grand inflation, but for the meanwhile, we can benefit from that inflation, especially if it's continuing to be, unrepresented inflation. But of course, that's me on my subject of breaking the market into hard market and soft market, but that's a story for another time. So, yeah, it's such small proportions of people, and the rest of the country is getting jobs. The rest of the country is building. Hell, I got a fucking job. That's why I'm so hard to reach these days, by the way. So let me just move the camera. There we go. And to Coon in the audience, yes, that is a panty and stocking post. Those are wall scrolls, actually. That's how weeb my roommate is, and I love it. So we're leaving that shit up. But yes, fringe fucking groups. So fringe that they're just news filler at this point. If the right comes out, the media is gonna rush in there to make them out to look like the devil. If the left comes out, the media is gonna rush in there to make them look like the devil, because it's an easy fucking story. You don't actually have to put any fucking thought into it. Which is a story, which is a different case when you get to things like Mueller. Now, the Mueller case is something very different. Very frustrating, because everyone's trying to make it out to be their victory, a victory for their side. The right is talking about how all of this stuff happened in the past, and all of these were people who had direct connections to Democrats. The left is talking about how these people had connections to Trump during the campaign, even though these things took place 2006, 2009. This is old fucking corruption. Nonetheless, corruption that obviously needed to be impaneled by a grand jury, but old news nonetheless. And now that he's, caught two people that no one gives a fuck about, people that people knew were corrupt to begin with, we've now got, the defense attorneys coming into play. And I know Politico is corrupt, but they did a pretty good job with this article, so we're going to read this. Mueller's brace for challenges to his authority. Robert Mueller is on an early winning streak. Stacked with some of the country's premier prosecutors, the special counsel has beaten back a pair of preliminary attempts to block his subpoena power and limit who he can question as a potential witness. In July, Mueller's team also managed to win approval to execute a no-knock search warrant, unusual in a white-collar case. But as the criminal case against former Donald Trump campaign officials Paul Manafort and Rick Gates speed towards a possible spring 2018 trial, speed. That's how fast our courts are. 6 months is speedy. Mueller's team is bracing for an array of challenges to its authority. Battle lines are already taking shape. Kevin Downing, Manafort's lead attorney, submitted a document Friday indicating that he anticipates filing pretrial motions that question the legal basis for and sufficiency of the charges, the suppression of evidence improperly obtained by search warrant, subpoena, or otherwise. Downing also said he may try to prevent Mueller's prosecutors from presenting some of their evidence during the criminal trial. This, of course, is all what any lawyer worth their salt would do in this situation. Attack the basis of the charges, attack the evidence, and attack the prosecutors. Mueller's team responded to the court Friday with a brief note saying they would need 3 weeks to present their case, sidestepping what would be an intense round of legal jockeying and attempts to undermine the way the special counsel has conducted its investigation. Distort, detract, deny is a common playbook for defense lawyers, said Julie Myers-Wood, a former Whitewater prosecutor. And if the allegations are serious here, I wouldn't expect lawyers to sit back or withhold any tool in a quest to undermine blah 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 blah. Skipping ahead a little bit, the Supreme Court, in a unanimous 1974 opinion, rejected Nixon's attempts to use executive privilege to withhold private presidential tape recordings and other materials despite a subpoena. In 1998, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia ruled that government lawyers ensnared in Starr's investigation of the Clinton White House didn't have the same attorney-client privilege as private attorneys. In the Mueller investigation, the probe itself may be ripe for legal questions. He's not operating under the independent counsel law that generated Whitewater, Iran-Contra, and 19 other investigations dating back to the post-Watergate years, because it lapsed in 1999. Instead, he's working under Justice Department regulations that allow for an outside lawyer to step in when the typical investigation process would present a conflict of interest for the department or other extraordinary circumstances. The situation is similar to the one that arose in 2003 when U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald was tapped to investigate whether George W. Bush White House deliberately leaked the identity of operative Valerie Plame Wilson. The case produced only one indictment, and a jury in 2007 convicted President Dick Cheney's former chief of staff, Louis Scooter Libby, of 4 counts of perjury, obstruction of justice, and making false statements. Bush later commuted Libby's prison sentence. Trump himself told the New York Times in July that he would consider it a violation if Mueller's investigators looked into his personal finances. And the president's personal attorney, Jay Sekulow, told Politico on Thursday he is primed to lodge formal objections with either Mueller or Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein if the Russia investigation took a wide or unexpected detour into issues like an old Trump real estate deal. We'd view that as an outside the scope of legitimate inquiry, Sekulow said. We'd raise it. Robert Ray, who succeeds Starr as the Clinton independent counsel, said Mueller is on solid ground fighting off most jurisdictional challenges because his office is technically part of the Justice Department. But Ray still expects defense attorneys to give these questions a go. In a case like Manafort's, Mueller may be wise to hand it over to the Department of Justice for prosecution, said Ronald Rotunda, a Chapman University law professor who served as a paid consultant during the Starr investigation. It's one thing to investigate if the president was, or his top aides were, in collusion with Russia in some nefarious way. It's another to investigate if some former aide hasn't paid his taxes. So this is whereabouts we're at, right? This case is a complete fucking school play, as spies like to call it. It's, you have absolutely nothing on the table here, right? It's business dealings with a Russian business that has ties to the Russian intelligence agency or is owned by the Russian intelligence agency, one of those two, and did business with a Turkish in a Turkish business with Ukrainians and Americans involved, including Manafort, Gates, Tony Podesta, these people. And you end up with this big, huge news story. It's what everyone's trying to talk about, but everyone's trying to, people are breaking fucking laws here, right? No one was supposed to leak the sealed fucking case filing, until it was unsealed on Monday. And the fact that someone leaked that was filed just fed into this piranha pit of media consumption. And it's not fucking healthy, is what it's not. It's why I only do this once a week instead of like every day. If I did it every day, I would only be able to do like 30-45 minutes, because it's too much for all day, every day. To go through every one of these stories and every one of the details is a little bit mad. I do it so that you don't have to, so that you can understand that it's not big shit. And while I understand that this is just as much a child's play, I'm really happy with what's happened in our next story. No, that's this one. Because this is where all of this is going. Right? Everything is divided. There's as far as the media would have you understand, the country is divided in two. It's a civil fucking war. Every time the so-called white supremacists come out, it's a civil fucking war, and talking with them just doesn't give answers. And every time the left comes out, it's Antifa terrorists, when all they're doing is fucking, breaking Windows ATMs and rolling trash cans around. Anarchy achieved, right, my friends? But this isn't... Just as much as that is getting us nowhere, so is this constant discussion of Hillary Clinton. Because this is someone getting thrown under the bus, essentially. In this story, we hear about Donna Brazile essentially getting thrown under the bus time and time and time again, and her begging people to hear her side of the story. She's just as corrupt as the next person. But she is begging the court of public opinion, and her book came out. I haven't read all of it yet. I will actually be talking about it next week once I've finished it, but I wanted to give you a look into the story so we can do a few articles on what is actually going on with the completely crumbling party that is run by the DNC Corporation and also the Hillary Clinton Foundation. Before I called Bernie Sanders, I lit a candle in my living room and put on some gospel music. I wanted to center myself for what I knew would be an emotional phone call. I had promised Bernie when I took the helm of the DNC after the convention that I would get to the bottom of whether Hillary Clinton's team had rigged the nomination process, as a cache of emails stolen by Russian hackers and posted online had suggested. I'd had my suspicion from the moment I walked through the door of the DNC a month or so earlier based on the leaked emails. But who knew if some of them might have been forged? I needed to have solid proof, and so did Bernie. This is all, of course, written from the perspective of Donna Brazile, who after Debbie Wasserman Schultz was taken out of control of the DNC, took over as chairman pro tem of the DNC, and as you'll find out, was tasked to basically save a drowning ship that spends a good $5-6 million a month and only earns maybe $2 million a month at best. But so I followed the money. My predecessor, Florida Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, had not been the most active chair in fundraising at the time, when Barack Obama's neglect had left the party in significant debt. As Hillary Clinton's campaign gained momentum, she resolved the party's debt and put it on a starvation diet. It had become dependent on her campaign for survival, for which she expected to wield control of its operations. This is all shit that I've talked about before, all across the last year. Debbie was not a good manager. By the way, she still blames Russia when it was an inside job. All the facts point to an inside job, but Debbie was not a good manager. She had not been very interested in controlling the party. She let Clinton's headquarters in Brooklyn do as it desired, so she didn't have to inform the party officers how bad the situation was. How much control Brooklyn had and for how long was still something I had been trying to uncover for the last few weeks. By September 7th, the day I called Bernie, I had found my proof, and it broke my heart. The Saturday morning after the convention in July, I called Gary Grenzler, the chief financial officer of Hillary's campaign. He wasted no words. He told me the Democratic Party was broke and $2 million in debt. What? I screamed. I am an officer of the party, and you've been telling us everything is fine and that they were raising money with no problems. That wasn't true, he said. Officials from Hillary's campaign had taken a look at the DNC's books. Obama left the party $24 million in debt, $15 million in bank debt, and more than $8 million owed to vendors after the 2012 campaign, and had been paying that off very slowly. Obama's campaign was not scheduled to pay it off until 2016. Hillary for America, the campaign, and the Hillary Victory Fund, its joint fundraising vehicle with the DNC, had taken care of 80% of that remaining debt in 2016, about $10 million, and had placed the party on an allowance. I didn't know about this. I assumed that none of the officers knew about it either. That was just Debbie's way. In my experience, she didn't come to the officers of the DNC for advice and counsel. She seemed to make decisions on her own and let us know at the last minute what she had decided, as she has done when she told us about the hacking only minutes before the Washington Post broke the news. You'll notice as I go through this, they are going to be throwing Debbie Wasserman Schultz under the fucking bus, even though she was literally Hillary's right-hand woman the entire fucking time. Now she's this rogue actor. You notice they keep describing her. She makes her decisions on her own. She doesn't come for counsel. She's a rogue actor. She acted on her own. Which is patently untrue. Donna Brazile may have been left out, but she certainly spoke with those who knew her. Those who she thought she was closest with. On the phone, Gary told me the DNC had needed a $2 million loan the campaign had arranged. That can't be true, I said. The party cannot take out a loan without the unanimous agreement of all the officers. Gary, how did they do this without me knowing? I don't know how Debbie relates to the officers, Gary said. He described the party as fully under the control of Hillary's campaign, which seemed to confirm the suspicions of the Bernie camp. The campaign had the DNC on life support, giving it money every month to meet its basic expenses, while the campaign was using the party as a fundraising clearinghouse. Under FEC law, an individual can contribute a maximum of $2,700 directly to a presidential campaign, but the limits are much higher for contributions to state parties and a party's national nominee. Individuals who had maxed out their $2,700 contribution to the limit to the campaign could write an additional check for $53,400 to the Hillary Victory Fund. That figure represented $10,000 to each of the 32 states' parties who were part of the Victory Fund agreement, $320,000 and $33,400 to the DNC. That money would be deposited into the states first and transferred to the DNC shortly after that. Money in the battleground states usually stayed in that state, but all other states funneled that money directly to the DNC, which quickly transferred money to Brooklyn. Alright, skipping ahead. What's the burn rate, Gary? I asked. How much money do we need every month to fund the party? The burn rate was $3.5 million to $4 million a month, he said. I gasped. I had a pretty good sense of the DNC's operations after having served as interim chair 5 years earlier. Back then, the monthly expenses were half that. What had happened? The party chair usually shrinks the staff between presidential election campaigns, but Debbie had chosen not to do that. She had stuck lots of consultants on the DNC payroll, and Obama's consultants were being financed by the DNC as well. When we hung up, I was livid. Not at Gary, but at this mess I had inherited. I knew that Debbie had outsourced a lot of the management of the party, and had not been the greatest at fundraising. I would not be that kind of chair, even if I was only an interim chair. Did they think I would just be a surrogate for them, get on the road and rouse up the crowds? I was going to manage this party as best I could and try and make it better, even if Brooklyn did not like this. Blah, 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 blah. She's playing with herself. Right around the time of the convention, the leaked emails revealed Hillary's campaign was grabbing money from the state parties for its own purposes, leaving the states with little to support down-ballot races. A Politico story published on May 2nd, 2016, describing the big fundraising vehicle she had launched the summer before, quoting a vow she had made to rebuild the party from the ground up. When our state parties are strong, we win, that's what will happen. Yet the states kept less than half of 1% of the $82 million they had amassed from the extravagant fundraisers Hillary's campaign was holding, just as Gary had described to me when he and I talked in August. When the Politico story described this arrangement as essentially money laundering for the Hillary Clinton campaign, which it was, Hillary's people were outraged at being accused of doing something shady. Bernie's people were outraged for their own reasons, saying this was part of a calculated strategy to throw the nomination to Hillary, which it was. Skipping ahead, when the party chooses the nominee, the custom is the candidate's team starts to exercise more control over the party. If the party only in the DNC, the RNC didn't start doing that until 2000. If the party has an incumbent candidate, as with the case of Clinton in 96 or Obama in 2012, this kind of arrangement is seamless because the party is already under control of the president. When you have an open contest without an incumbent and competitive primaries, the party comes under the candidate's control only after the nominee is certain. When I was manager of Al Gore's campaign in 2000, we started inserting our people into the DNC in June. This Victory Fund agreement, however, had been signed in August 2015, just 4 months after Hillary announced her candidacy and nearly a year before she officially had the nomination. I had tried to search out any other evidence of internal corruption that would show that the DNC was rigging the system to throw the primary to Hillary, but I could not find any party affairs or among the staff. I had gone department by department, blah blah blah, she's covering for people. I had to keep my promise to Bernie. I was in agony as I dialed him. Keeping this secret was against everything that I stood for, all that I valued as a woman and a public servant. Oh, this is all from her book, by the way. I'm just reading from her fucking book. I discussed the fundraising agreement that each of the candidates had signed. Bernie was familiar with it. He and his staff ignored it. They had their own way of raising money through small donations. I described how Hillary's campaign had taken another step. I told Bernie I had found Hillary's joint fundraising agreement. I explained that the cancer was that she had exerted this control of the party long before she became its nominee. Had I known this, I would have never accepted the interim chair position, but here we were with only weeks before the election. Bernie took this stoically. He did not yell or express outrage. Instead, he asked me what I thought Hillary's chances were. The polls were unanimous in her winning, but what he wanted to know was my own assessment. I had to be frank with him. I did not trust the polls, I said. I told him I had visited states around the country and found a lack of enthusiasm for her everywhere. A lack of enthusiasm. I was concerned about the Obama coalition and about millennials. I urged Bernie to work as hard as he could to bring his supporters into the fold with Hillary and the campaign with all the heart and hope he could muster. He might find some of her positions too centrist, and her coziness with the financial elites distasteful, but he knew and I knew that the alternative was a person who would blah 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 blah. So, here we are again. The same story, but this time now we're talking about it with regards to Donna Brazile, spilling the fucking beans on just how fucking corrupt and broken the Democratic Party has been. And that's, that's not new news. As it was said in that article, in May of 2016, we had seen all of those emails which talked about this essentially legal money laundering because no one has legislated upon it, right? And time again, it's just these giant loopholes, these giant fucking loopholes. Which brings us, yeah, that's the same story. I don't actually have tons of time today. We're only going to be going for like 2 hours. But we're going to be finishing on this story. Or I'm not going to be able to go for 2 hours. I'm only going to be going for 1 hour. But we finish with a Hill article, The Memo. Trump tries to deepen Democrat divisions. President Trump is trying to foment tensions in the Democratic Party after new revelations about last year's primary campaign emerged from Donna Brazile, who served as interim head of the Democratic National Committee. But Democrats in both the pro-Hillary Clinton and pro-Bernie Sanders wings of the party insist that Trump's interjections will only bring them together. Nothing unites the Democratic Party like Trump, said Tad Vadine, who was senior advisor to Sanders during last year's primary. Anyway, I'm not going to read this whole article to you, because I've only got like 10 minutes left, but the saga began with the publication of an excerpt from Brazile's forthcoming book in Politico. In it, she outlined an agreement between a former CEO of the DNC, Amy Dacey, and Clinton's campaign manager, Robbie Mook. If you've been following me for some time, you should probably be familiar with the name Robbie Mook. Robbie Mook's a fucking crook. According to Brazile, deal set out how in exchange for raising money and investing in the DNC, Hillary would control the party's finances, strategy, and all the money raised. In Brazile's account, that deal was struck in August 2015, well before the first votes had been cast in the party's primary process. Trump characterized Brazile as writing that Clinton had paid for and stole the Democratic primary. He also picked up on comments from Senator Elizabeth Warren, who, when asked by CNN's Jake Tapper on Thursday whether she accepted the primary was rigged, replied, yes. Trump, who calls Warren blah 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 blah. Both Brazile and Warren hit back at Trump. Warren accused him of feeling desperation to change the subject. Now, it's actually kind of hilarious because that's what this story has become. And Trump, of course, is going to interject because that's exactly what he does. He keeps his people happy by making these little interjectory statements and pointing out that, rightfully, that the party is completely divided. Sure, Tad Levine may say that the fucking party is doing all right, that, Trump brings them together, but they don't. The Democratic Party is deeply divided among two very, very much more acceptable lines for America. Like, the American people are much more willing to accept a Bernie Sanders-esque social democrat, and they're much more willing to accept a, if only for, up until this point, I think Hillary Clinton's loss means a lot more than people give it credit, but there's the corporate Democrats and there's the social Democrats, who are, a hair's throw away from, they're lazy socialists is what they are. Lazy middle-class socialists. But, the party is split in two, and no matter how much they like to pretend they're playing together, they are poaching each other's votes. They are rigging the party against each other. And this is all okay because it's tradition. Oh, whoop-de-fucking-do, that tradition. That tradition isn't something that Trump did. That's not something that, the only reason that Bush did it is because of, that's what he did. I'm gonna do it too. And, that's what you got. It's bullshit is what it fucking is. That everyone is jumping on this subject, but that's all these stories are. Trying to keep these big unanimous stories of the United States tearing it apart when it's not. The country isn't tearing itself apart. It's just a lot easier to hear the fringe. And very, very scaredy cat people, fearful people are jumping every time they hear the fringe make a noise and acting like the fringe is somehow closer to the center than they actually are. Well, they're not. There's a huge fucking spectrum of politics out there. People who want certain things and don't want others. People who want nothing. People who want everything. People who are complete authoritarians. People who are complete libertarians. People who are complete socialists. People who are complete fucking religious nuts. People who are completely anti-religious, anarcho-capitalists. It's a mess of politics, and you're not going to, the country's not going to tear itself apart any more than the college Republicans in the 80s tore the country apart, or the hippies in the 60s tore the country apart, or 9/11 tore the country apart, or anything else has torn this country apart. It's just been easier and easier with each generation for people to broadcast messages, for people to communicate with each other. And that reduction of latency, that ease of access for communication technology and even broadcasting has changed the playing field. There may be, very few people watching this show in the grand scheme of things, but there are people from all over the world watching this show. And thank you all so very much for doing so. It's absolutely amazing. Absolutely fucking amazing. But that said, I need to quickly brush my hair and get LT ready to go, because I have to go. It has been absolutely wonderful talking to you guys again this week, and I will be here in the morning for a gaming stream. Excuse me, not here, over on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/SevyRose. I'm going to start that at 10 a.m. And that's 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, tell your friends if you like this show. Get them to come watch the show with you. I'd love to have more people come around and see what I'm doing here. Even if while I'm sick, I'm just reading you news that I've picked out because I think it tells you the most important parts of the story. Mostly because I'm usually waiting until news articles come out that tell that part of the story to actually talk about that part of the story. But yeah, I love doing this with you guys. This is one of my favorite things to do. And even with this new job that is taking up all my fucking time, I don't have time to fucking piss in... I don't have fucking time to do anything, basically, anymore. So I basically stole the weekend away so that I can spend it with you guys. Because I love spending time with you guys. Just been great. But I really do have to go. My throat is killing me. My dog is very clearly going to shit on the carpet. Or tile, I guess. I have tile. So I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you very much.